Hi, I'm Andrew Drane, Principal of Harcourts Hills Living, and welcome to another edition of This is Hills Living. And today we're interviewing Kaushal Bhuta, who is the chiropractor and owner of this business, Next Backs Sports, here in Carrington Road, Castle Hill. Since he first hung out his shingle on the hill 16 years ago, Kaushal has developed a large and faithful clientele, and with good reason. His care is effective and his follow-up thorough. He's a great practitioner and he's a good man. It'll be a pleasure to talk with him. Let's get cracking. Bad pun intended. So Kaushal, first of all, thanks for interviewing today. It's a pleasure to be sitting here in front of you.
Pleasure to be here, Drane. Thank you for the opportunity.
And one thing I noticed about you is that you've got this insatiable desire to learn and to educate yourself. So you've got a knowledge of skeletal and neuromuscular functioning of the human body. Where did this desire, because from what I understand, you're very well qualified, you've been to university, you've got multiple degrees. Where did that passion come from to educate yourself?
I think it was always there, Andrew, and I must admit, I think as I got more into it, I enjoyed it more and more and more. To this day, I love it. I love educating myself on pretty much any topic. But obviously, you know, from a very young age, I chose health as a career. And how long is a piece of string, mate?
How important is it for your customers then, if your clients, that you constantly educate yourself? Is it something that you do to provide a better level of service, or is it a combination of you just wanting to learn more about this field that you've chosen?
First and foremost, it was something that I had chosen. So well before, it's now mandatory. It's now something that you have to do to continue with ongoing registration. From the day of graduation, I'd been enrolled in a postgraduate degree, and then because of earning that, then taught at university and was, continuing to learn and so forth. In those days, it wasn't mandatory. It was a voluntary thing. It was just assumed. I've always exceeded my requirements for ongoing education, professional education, and then some, I suppose, because I'm just naturally curious.
You taught at university, so they always say the best way to learn is to teach. Tell me a bit about that time that you were at university.
That was a fantastic time. So it was, I was probably I would have been maybe the second or third chiropractor to earn a postgraduate degree. There was no such thing. So most of the chiropractors, fair enough, you graduated and you went out to practice. I sort of took a slightly different route in the sense that I started my research degree. So when you start research, you start with an honours or a master's, and then because of that, in those days, they would automatically give you a job as a lecturer or an associate lecturer actually. Yeah. And then because of that, and because of the expansion of chiropractic into our university system, so there are 4 universities in Australia graduating chiropractors at the moment, okay. There's been a big growth in the number of chiropractors graduating from university. Because of that, there was a demand for people with academic qualifications to come and teach. So I started teaching as an anatomy tutor and a pathology tutor. Wow. I got that to be back in 1995, 96.
Disclosing your age, yeah.
Oh, mate, don't, yeah. And then I continued teaching in part or full-time capacity, as well as practicing actually at the time in Glen Waverley, in Melbourne. And so I taught for probably the better, and that was what actually brought me to Sydney, was the teaching at Macquarie University. So I taught full-time from 1998 roughly till 2002, 2003.
And there's a reason we got on well. We're both from Melbourne. We both spent a lot of time in Glen Waverley where we grew up. So there you go. Mate, let's explore that, the journey of chiropractic as an industry, because we've often spoken about how hard it was many, many years ago to get acceptance. Can you just take me through what occurred there?
Look, the seminal thing was that New Zealand, our friends in New Zealand, launched a Royal Commission into chiropractic. That was back in 1977. Okay. And similarly now there's some sort of inquiry launched by, or some sort of assessment launched by the Victorian government in terms of chiropractors and children. These are often typical battles, if you like. So what happens is that you've got all the forces that don't like our existence for one reason or another. And then, of course, you've got all the forces that, which is primarily the public, I might add. The public have always voted for their feet because they knew instinctively what we now know through studies 40 and 50 years later.
So what you mean by that is they would come to you for treatment and they'd be treated?
In the 1970s, if you had back pain, chances are, first of all, there was the medical then approach to back pain. And I'm not speaking out of order. There was a guy called, an orthopaedic surgeon called Gordon Waddell, and he wrote a lovely book called The Back Pain Revolution, and that was published about 20 years ago now. And in the medical world, it was a revolution because the prescription for back pain in the 1970s was, look, go and have some bed rest, or look, this is just a psychiatric problem, or this is in your mind. Hard to fathom now, but that was the fairly standardised advice, or opinion is probably more correct, because there was no research to back it up. And in that, of course, we thrived because massage, manipulation, certainly in those days, some of my colleagues did acupuncture as acupuncture, and even that was controversial in those days among acupuncturists and Chinese medicine. And they did, exercise prescription was still in its infancy at that stage as well. In fact, a really striking example is Dennis Lilly. Okay. He was recommended so many times. He's got a particular fault with his back, which is very common to fast bowlers. We now know, but in those days there wasn't even the technology to pick it up. X-rays would have at some point shown nothing, and then at much later points might have shown something, but they were just X-rays. So in fact, his story is inspirational to anyone with back pain. He was really determined. He exercised. He sought treatment where he could. And he got himself rehabilitated to do that. So 1977, there was none of this around. So this big inquiry was there, and of course, what was the outcome of the inquiry? That chiropractic has a legitimate place in the healthcare system. It was disadvantaged because it had no formal mechanism of training, and I suppose most importantly, had no formal mechanism of registration. In other words, anybody could go and hang their shingle out and say, I'm a chiropractor. So that would have adversely affect our ability to enforce a standard.
So there's no barrier basically to...
There was no barrier, no. There was no barrier. And so as of 1977, because that Commission of Public Inquiry was so strongly in favour of chiropractic, the Victorian government introduced the first legislation into Parliament for a register of chiropractors, and pretty much since then every other state followed suit, and of course now it's a national board. And it also of course made strong recommendations about chiropractic being within the university system, and again that was first done in Victoria, and then spread to New South Wales, Western Australia, Queensland at the moment.
So what are the qualifications to become a chiropractor? When did you graduate, Kaushal?
Graduated in 1993.
Okay, so 77, I was going to ask you about how you handle the adversity of public opinion, of not public necessarily, but opinion of chiropractors. You kept going in an industry that was always controversial. How did you, what made you keep going? Was it just you had a belief, was it a belief in what you were doing in the industry?
It's a very interesting dichotomy when the anatomy in those days made sense. It just made sense. We studied the back like no one else did in those days. No one, even my colleagues in physiotherapy in those days, I'm talking about it, it's perhaps changed now, but they didn't spend as much time on the back, and then that too, what was an acceptable treatment. And there was very little in the way of research. It was all what we call basic science research. So you had to take tissue samples or demonstrate it in a microscope or so forth. And clinical studies were yet to come, actually studying populations and how they responded to different treatments. And certainly, this thing. So I don't know. It always felt right. It just felt right. There was always this sense that, when you dig down to it, yes, there's a lot of criticism, but even then, interestingly enough, at uni we were taught about the organised campaign, which continues in Australia to this day, and it actually has its origins in the American Medical Association in the 1960s, and they had that's what was known as a Committee on Quackery. And the reason we know all this was because chiropractors in the United States got sick and tired of such discriminatory treatment and all that. And in fact, in the United States, it's actually come to a complete standstill. The pendulum swung right the other way because, we have contributed enormously to the body of public knowledge, to the way in which back pain, neck pain, headache are treated. That we've contributed enormously to the landscape of practice and enormously to evidence and so forth. But this Committee on Quackery was formed, and one of their first targets was blaming us for strokes, which is untrue. The studies are quite clear.
How do they put that correlation together?
Well, so what happens is that a person suffering a stroke will be suffering a headache or neck pain or dizziness or some other symptom, and it seems like it's headache and neck pain, and they, a good portion of them would have visited the chiropractor in the morning and then presented perhaps with a stroke in the afternoon or presented to emergency in the afternoon and so forth. So, and again, the reason we know that is because we studied a couple of things around that. So there's been a lot of different studies that looked at exactly that. So if chiropractors were causing a stroke, what you should see is that people visiting chiropractors, there should be a higher incidence of stroke than in the general population, and there's not. It's exactly the same or very similar. And that's been done a lot of times, that type of study. And then the other one was we've actually now studied the forces involved, and the forces that we use, they might look dramatic on film and look very, look this, that and the other, but actually they're no more than quickly turning your head, basically. So, it's... We were a small group. We were not organised. We were an easy target at the time, and that prejudice to some degree has continued on. There's really no doubt now that if you have neck pain or back pain or a headache, that certainly seeking the advice and guidance of a chiropractor really shouldn't be discouraged. If it's something that's right, you feel it's right for you.
So, Kaushal, you seem to like to impart your knowledge on people, and I'm assuming your staff benefit from that as well. What would be a natural progression if you worked at next, back, sports? What's the next level for the people that work here, and how do you promote that?
So the natural progression has been from work experience through to graduating. They often then enrol in chiropractic degrees, or my wife's encouraging people to go and study OT. Interestingly enough, we've had a lot of contact with physiotherapy students and so forth, and then they've graduated. Those that can stay with us, but we're really, really proud to provide almost a training pathway. And they come, and when they work with us as assistants, they get very much hands-on knowledge and an understanding of the practical side of dealing with the client, practitioner-client interaction.
So let's get this right. Work experience. So they're studying obviously at university at that stage.
No, they're actually studying at school.
Okay.
So they'll come from school.
Then they'll do their degree. What's the degree called?
So the chiropractic degree is it's got different iterations, but it's basically a master's in chiropractic. Right. That's a master's degree.
4 years?
5 years.
5 years. Okay. So in that 5 years, are they working here?
Yes, generally, yes.
Okay. And then once they've got their degree, they can either stay here as a practitioner, or they can leave and do their own thing.
Yes.
So do you promote that when you employ people, and when you interview? Do you say to people, look, we're going to provide you with a pathway to become a chiropractor in your own right?
Not so much an interview. There's a phase where, I suppose we test each other out for 6 months or so, maybe 8 months or so, and see if, we get to observe their traits during that time. And those that we feel that have potential, we'll definitely mention a pathway, yes.
Okay. And the difficulty, the dynamic of having admin staff maybe and medical staff, yes. How do you manage that as a leader of the business?
They're not strictly speaking admin, so they're as hands-on as we are, and we are basically, if you like, touching base before each patient and every patient. So we're constantly interacting.
So do you have any administration staff in the business now, or are you focusing more on...
We focus more on treatment delivery at the moment. Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's what you love, that's what you're passionate about. And I think a lot of business, we've discussed this before, we've had administration staff, maybe some at the front desk, but we've been able to dispense with that.
A lot of those roles have become redundant because of technology, purely because of technology. It's quite extraordinary.
Which is actually a good thing, right? Because then you can focus your leadership on those people that are doing exactly what you've done and becoming chiropractors.
Yes, yes. And well, yeah, but that's partly the focus. I mean, obviously, I think the main focus is the client. You know,
Of course.
making sure that the client experience is consistent, which is not easy in healthcare.
But you need good staff to deliver that as well, don't you?
Yeah, we need good practitioners. Yeah, we need good practitioners who it's a complex field to understand. It really is. There's a lot of different choices. We've got to honour and respect those choices, but at the same time, we've also got to provide the guidance that both our experience and also the literature, has trained us to do. The scientific literature, yeah.
All right, Kaushal, the name of the business is very descriptive, Necks, Backs, Sports. Yes. Tell me why you chose that name, and is that what your focus is? Is it that simple, necks, backs and sport injuries?
Chose that name, that'd be going back to close to when I graduated. And the common convention then was to set up XYZ Chiropractic. But the thing as a young graduate I found was that there was a lot of confusion amongst people. What does chiropractic mean? Yeah. What does a chiropractor do was probably the number one question that I got over the last 25 years or so. And so hence I chose a descriptive name that we treat necks and backs and sporting injuries. Yeah.
So tell me then, for the viewers, what does a chiropractor do? What would your elevator pitch be if someone said, what does a chiropractor do? What would you say?
A chiropractor maximises someone's health through the alleviation of neck pain, back pain, strains and sprains, allowing them to function at a much more to their potential.
So let's discuss the paediatric side of your business. Do you have a special interest in kids' health?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Yes. That came about because of my elder son, who's now 17, and he was a tremendously colicky baby. And then what that put me onto was actually a group of colleagues who at the time were really heavily interested in researching and talking about chiropractor's treatment of colic, one of these traditional things. And so because I was so, as usual, I was so interested, so I started learning from a lovely mentor here, Dr. Braden Keel down in Victoria, and he's a lovely, lovely man. And then I met with, she was then must be retired now, but Professor Joyce Miller, who's a chiropractor, but she ran the course, the paediatric course at Bournemouth University, so the Anglo-European College of Chiropractic, and that's the only only award-bearing degree in the world. Certainly, that's that's translatable in terms of Australian degrees. And so as far as I'm concerned, I learnt from the best, both from the research point of view, but then also from a practical point of view, how we could affect certain conditions. So we primarily look at kids. The kids that come to us primarily have issues with coordination, with movement, and then with functions that arise out of that. Yeah. Certainly one thing that probably it has been well established now, and that is that babies and children are perfectly capable of feeling pain, perfectly capable, and if their cry is because of pain, maybe that cry is different from because they're hungry or they're just upset and irritable or so forth. So I personally believe that chiropractors have a big role to play, appropriately trained chiropractors have a big role to play in this field. So
what sort of age group then are you with kids? Are you dealing with them from a very young age?
Pretty much from certainly the ones that I practiced. Well, in where I trained, all of Bournemouth Hospital would refer all of their babies to our student clinic. And so, we were really seeing a lot of irritable babies that weren't settling and sleeping. In Europe, it's a very common thing. Hands-on therapy for that type of thing is a very common approach to help with. And I'm not saying there are not other things that go on at the same time, but they're a very common approach, and then we worked hand in hand with the midwives and the obstetricians at Bournemouth Hospital.
You mentioned a mentor before. I've always thought, and this is a business theory, that if you're going to find a mentor, find the best in the business. And you just said then he was the best in the business. So you found someone that was able to help you.
He's one of the foremost. He's probably one of the foremost premier. He was the one, along with Neil Davies, who actually was instrumental in actually setting up a paediatric-based or training course, a university-based training course in Australia, at RMIT. So he's very, very, certainly very well respected in the profession. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. So in your business, being client-oriented, client-focused has a profound effect on not just their health, but also their well-being. How do you provide that experience to your clients? Obviously, you've got the treatment itself. How do you make them feel comfortable? How do you make them feel so good they want to come back the next time for more treatment?
My personal opinion, so again, in our age group, we would probably recommend it, or we would remember it.
Mid-20s?
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely, we would remember it. But there was a time when healthcare practitioners were God. You couldn't question, and that's not a very good health experience. The person needs to have control over what's happening. One thing chiropractors have always done really well is listen. They really have, because they listened to people with back pain. They took them seriously and tried to help those that they could. And it's a big group of people. It's not a small group of people. Back pain, neck pain, these sort of muscle and joint and pain syndrome type situations. So, part of the patient experience is just making sure we're there to listen to them. And that's a skill. That's a real skill. We deal with what we can deal with, and then where we feel that a person needs additional support, we have an extensive referral network. And making really one of the jobs is trying to make sure you get to where you need to be.
What about aesthetics? Let's come to your office. You put them in a room, and I've been here, you feel comfortable, the music's playing, you've got maybe some sort of scent is all that important a part of the process? Very important, very early on in, and again, see, times have changed. So when I started practice, people weren't as stressed. Life was different, it really was different. I really do feel that what a patient goes through in life has changed. And the reason I twigged on that was probably certainly by the time maybe 2006 or 7 rolled around, I found a lot of people falling asleep on the treatment table. People were very stressed. But again, maybe it's a Sydney phenomena, but I'm sure it's actually Melbourne now as well. But people were very stressed. They're probably not getting good sleep, which is a whole different thing that we have to discuss and chat about and, and look at what measures can help. People were, we just really found that if we could provide a consistent, a place that's a bit sealed off from the outside world, and that half an hour was theirs, it was something that was valuable to a lot of people. Do you think that, stress relief and sleep are important, especially in our jobs, we're very stressed with business and whatnot. Yes. Do you think that coming and getting a massage, for instance, is a good stress release, a form of stress release? Yeah. So in our practice, which we sort of had done this for a long time, it's common practice now, but again, we did this, probably 20 plus years ago. We have what we call a multimodal practice, and that is that we use massage, we use, acupuncture or dry needling. We use traction or manipulation or adjustment, whatever you want to call it. And we also use exercise prescription. That combination, just even the first 3, bring profound pain relief, anesthesia. The studies are very clear about that now. So what tends to happen when you've got pain relief is you get some degree of relaxation. And if it's enough relaxation to tip you into allowing your body to switch off and your mind to switch off, and if there's this constant nagging ache, I defy anybody to have a good night's sleep. They'll sleep, but it'll be a restless sleep.
and they may not be able to descend into deep sleep. And there's a whole lot of factors around that, but certainly I find that it's a very important thing that it certainly has been for me all my life, and I obviously I recommend it to others, having both experienced it and also it's well backed up now.
Yeah, one factor these days is iPhones. I know that I've now stopped an hour before I go to sleep. I've stopped using my iPhone because I know that.
I'm going to mention a super controversial study that was published out of the University of the Sunshine Coast and then caught the media headlines. Okay. And it was just, poor guys. They've just made an observation. Agreed, it was an observational study, right? It wasn't a controlled study, but generally you'll do an observational study and that will go on to a controlled study.
Who do they upset?
Oh, they upset some nutters, I think. Well, the people got really upset because the study was very clear in the way it was couched. People seem to be growing horns at the base of their skull. The figures were startling. I think there were 1,200 participants.
Wow.
I think it was around 31 or 40%, something in that range. I think the age ranges were between 18 and 65.
It's because of being hunched over, is it a fact?
Well, that was their that was their, I wouldn't say conclusion, they said this is our hypothesis,
yeah, okay.
And they're obviously going to go on and further test that. That was picked up by the media, and then there was an ensuing firestorm going, oh, this is not a study, and all this sort of stuff. It's an observational study, and it certainly lays the groundwork for future studies. My personal belief is that this is out of control. This is out of control.
Have you found that phenomenon now of kids slouching over, looking at their phones? Are you seeing more evidence of back damage, back pain, neck pain, posture change?
I am seeing what we call anecdotal evidence. I see it in my practice.
Yeah.
When we look at those, we look at practice, and then if we see a trend, then we try and organise a study around that, and you go on from there. But I'm certainly noticing within my practice that posture is appalling between adults, children. It's just, we're all doing it. It's crazy. It's like not got to reply. It's poor keep not to reply to the text. So my personal approach has been, well, the phone's away, replying to a message can just wait for maybe half an hour to an hour. I've got my standing desk, of course, which is a big recommendation, very reasonable now, very accessible, they're not difficult to come by. Treadmill desk. When I first saw that, and when, this is back in 2008, I saw a version of that, Jed said it was probably a cause for merriment. It was a bit of a joke, but it's the reality. We're on our devices so much. Yeah. I mean, there is another study I could quote, and we're talking 14 hours of device use, outside of work use. It's
hard now to disappear, isn't it? When we were kids, you could go home and spend a weekend at your parents' place and no one could get hold of you. It was a sanctuary.
But you're in your backyard, you would go out, there was a sort of safety and there, I'd be the first. I didn't let my kids go to the local park on their own. Yeah. We would go with them and watch them and that sort of stuff. We would zip off down to the Billabong and, ride our bikes, and we'd be out the back playing cricket. We played footy, we'd kick the ball.
Climbing trees.
Yeah, we'd just be out and we would have our eyes level to the horizon, would be standing upright. Yeah. And then over the back fence, one of the mums would call for it's dinner time, so we'd know it was time to go in, sort of thing. So, yeah, it's very different. It's very different, and it's very much more, I suppose now it's a case where we need to actually, schedule in time when we are not using that device. We've quarantined it and we're standing upright and we're looking about us and we're noticing the sky and the trees and the whatever. Look up.
So at a business level, Kaushal, is it important for you to attract clients, and how do you attract clients? You go out there and find them, or is it word of mouth, they come to you?
It's mostly word of mouth. Okay. It's mostly word of mouth. Initially when we were a young business and we were setting up, naturally we had to, get the word out there about who we were and what we did. But really 90% of our business is word of mouth.
Wow. And how long do you think it's taken to get to that level as a business?
It takes a long time. Takes a long time.
How long have you been in business?
Been in business in the hills. We've been in business 16 years.
Okay, 16.
Yeah, 16 years. Yeah, and as a business, we've been around for, in one way or another, for 23 years, I think.
Yeah, when I come here, it's always full. You've never got empty rooms. So saying that 90% is word of mouth, that's impressive, isn't it? You've got a business that people will just come to you without having to go out there now and market yourself necessarily. How did you get to that point? Was it great service? Was it great chiropractic?
I would like to think so. Look, I think in the early days we were the innovators, and so it just built up a very, very trustworthy, loyal clientele, who've sustained us for a very long time. And now we've got the next generation coming through, so we met through BNI and things like that. So we're part of the community, and we'll go out into the community and give people opportunity to chat to us. And very often, which of the what the figures? I mean, which of the 80% of, let's say 80% is a conservative figure, it could be upwards of 85, 90, but which of the 80% of people, who haven't had at least one episode of back pain or neck pain, don't want to maybe chat about what's going on?
I was going to ask you, how do you know if your client's satisfied? But obviously the proof of the pudding's in the tasting, because they
just ask, they go, my wife, my husband, my father, my son, my mother has this problem, do you think you can help? And I suppose the way to do that is to have the clinical interview.
But the clients keep coming back as well, Kaushal. They don't leave here unhappy with the treatment. They come back because they know the treatment helped. So again, the proof is there, that's why you've got
the higher the percentage. It's we'd love 100%. That would be fantastic. But it's healthcare is an interesting thing. You just don't know what's going to walk in the door. And it can take some time to get to the bottom of what the problem might be and so forth. Yeah.
Can I ask you this question? And I don't know if you can answer or not, but what would be the hardest case you've had to treat, and did you treat it?
Look, the ones we're proudest of, we get this group of people, chiropractors in general, get this group of people. We are the point of last recourse prior to a surgical intervention. Okay. So there are many such cases. The person's choice is not for injections or surgery, and we've therefore very successfully abated their symptoms and managed them what we call conservatively or non-surgically. Yeah. So they're real, they're always...
So they've been told that they'll probably have to get surgery. They've come to you and you've said, well, let's treat this. You've treated it. In
some cases, again, it could be just the bombastic opinion of the surgeon, which thankfully is much less these days that generational change has taken place. But they've just been told, even if you don't choose surgery now, well, I'll see you in X years' time for surgery. So that's not always inevitable, I mean, we try and work within that framework, and and sometimes it is there's not to speak of the advances in surgical techniques, they're phenomenal as well. But we're obviously very proud we can help a person achieve what they would like to achieve. Yeah. And fair enough, there's certain interventions that don't appeal to me. and I really wouldn't, I myself have a disc issue in the neck, you wouldn't really know it, because touch wood, I've been very successfully managed all my life with my colleagues. So.
Kaushal, how important are your own personal attributes when it comes to relating to clients? What do you think you have? And I know you well, and I know what the answer to this question is, but in your industry, how is it important that your attributes are commensurate to what you do?
I'm lucky in that I got the chance to do something that I'm genuinely interested in, and what most interests me is people's stories. It just interests me. I don't know why. And I never get tired. I'm not the type. So I remember a friend who is actually now a client, and he was complaining to me of his then GP. And again, we're talking practitioners of an older generation when there was this, well, this is us and this is you, and, there needs to be this professional distance, which it does. There needs to be a professional boundary, but, at the same time, it doesn't stop you taking an interest in someone. And, it was just bordering on negligence, what this chap was, just not looking after this person's healthcare needs. And on talking to them, I got the distinct impression that if they would meet socially, then it was, oh, look, don't talk to me about that. That's work. I'm not here in a work capacity. I'm just interested. I'm always curious of what the drivers of health are. And then every healthcare professional has their own particular, viewpoint as to where they come from, their modality, their particular, their particular training in dealing with a particular problem. So, yeah, I'm always curious, and I do quite enjoy spending time with people.
And that can be look. Your success is evident by that. You've chosen an industry that you love, a profession that you love. You love people. You love hearing their stories. It's a great combination for any business, for any success.
It becomes infectious. It really does become infectious.
So various commentators now are saying the economy is in bad shape and the future's not looking bright. Do you find that the change in economy affects your business? Does it affect people coming to get chiropractic work if things are tighter at home?
Yes and no. No, really, to begin with. Where the squeeze is coming now, the squeeze definitely has been a lowering of health insurance rebates, and it literally has, there's less. They get less now than they did 10 years ago, actual rebate. It's being diverted elsewhere, even though they're paying more money. But what I have found, again, it's going back, right? But I began my practice in the recession that we had to have, Paul Keating's recession. Yeah. And I discovered something very interesting in recessions or in downturns. Actually, more people come to your door because everyone's a little anxious, stressed. They need to sort their bodies so that they can work and so forth. So we tend to see, healthcare in general tends to be fairly busy. Yeah. In terms of then affordability and out-of-pocket expenses, big hot topic these days. Yeah. It's very interesting. If you're providing a good service, people are reasonable. They're not unreasonable, and we do our best within that. I haven't necessarily found that in my lifetime, but maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm sort of half, glass half full.
Well, I guess in any economy, if you've got a good business, the clients are happy, you've got good word of mouth, a good referral network, you do a good job, and it's a great business, they're always going to come back regardless. And that's what...
Yeah, the passion of the person doing it really makes a difference. That really makes a difference, and how well they can communicate that.
Kaushal, I appreciate your honesty and candour.
Mate, I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you very much for your time today. Hi, I'm Andrew Drane from Harcourts Hills Living, and thanks for joining us on another episode of This is Hills Living. Make sure you keep an eye out for our next interview where we're talking to another local business owner. And please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, click on the notifications bell, and also make sure you get to Instagram and Facebook just to ensure you're getting these videos as they come out.